front about something. I know a lot of people are going to laugh. But when I was a kid, I was a big fan of Thomas the Tank Engine. And to a certain extent, I still am. I know a lot of you, are going to think poorly of me because of that. Oh, it's a show for little kids, Darkness. Why do you like that? Well, for one, it's a bit of nostalgia in my room, just because I got this whole crate filled with nothing but die-cast Thomas the Tank Engine toys. There's another one. I collected these things like crazy when I was younger. I still have them. But the thing about Thomas the Tank Engine that I think will always be distinct to me, and the reason why I still like it so much, when you compare to stuff like Barney and Teletubbies or the Wiggles, and the latter two I actually grew out of before I even got a chance to watch them, Thomas handled entertaining children a lot differently. Whereas you take something like Barney the Dinosaur, which very rarely, it taught like regular lessons like you should always share and say you're sorry and little shit like that. But it was mainly the whole point of it was to entertain the kid for a half hour so their parents didn't have to deal with them. But Thomas always did it strangely. For one, the idea behind Thomas, or rather, more like the visual style of Thomas, where they took actual model trains and positioned them accordingly, and reworked animations and things like that. It's all very neat, especially for someone who understands how model trains work, and I used to be big into them when I was little too. So it's neat to look at just how they did it, especially nowadays with the newer episodes are all CGI. So you really can't. It's not the same as it was. I mean, there's nothing wrong with CGI, but it kind of took away some of Thomas's charm. I've only seen a handful of the new episodes, just because I only watched the old ones now, only because I remember watching when I was little. So there's a nostalgia factor for me. But the other thing is that Thomas always had a story involved. Each episode was a different story about characters interacting with other characters, and there was always a lesson at the end of it. But the stories were always interesting. The writing in Thomas was always very creative, and often the stories were so good that it could entertain an adult viewer just as well as a kid. I mean, if you've ever watched an episode of Thomas the Tank Engine, and honestly, some of the haters, I don't think you actually have, you would know that, especially growing up with it. So, I mean, there's a lot to like about Thomas. It's one of those rare occasions where it's a kid's show, yeah, but it sort of transcends being as easy to grow out of as, say, Barney or Teletubbies or shit like that. There was effort, I should say, put into it. There's something to like about it, even for someone who's as older than me. After all, the targeted audience for Thomas would be more than 10 years younger than me now at this point. But anyway, that's not what this video is about. This video is about, obviously there's a Halloween theme going on here, judging by the intro. I hope you picked that up. There were a few Thomas episodes that kind of went over the line, I would say, as kid shows, because, quite frankly, there were a few episodes that just freaked me the fuck out. Okay, I'll be upfront with you. Even today, looking back at those stories, I'm like, wow, that is creepy as hell. It's one of those things. I hate admitting it. But it's true. You gotta see this, okay? You gotta see this.
You'll work in the yards until I can trust you again. Duncan was delighted with Peter Sam's dilemma. Fancy not securing your freight cars on a hill. They'll come back to spook you and your special funnel. Woo! And who's to say you're not afraid of ghosts? Snapped Rusty. Ghosts? Things that go bump in the night? Rubbish! Well, I'll tell you a story that will make your funnel quiver, Rusty said. A long time ago, a little engine was returning home.
Oh, what? What's the engine gonna do? I mean, he's gonna see a ghost and, not be able to cross the bridge or something? Ooh, I mean, this doesn't seem very scary, right?
It was a misty, moonlit night. Suddenly, the engine lost control and plunged over the side into the swamps below. He was never found again, but Many a workman will tell you that when the moon is full, they have seen the little engine trying to get home. But he never reaches the other side.
That's depressing as hell!
It was
Who
a
wrote
misty
this?
moonlit night.
Who? Who wrote this?
Suddenly,
Whose idea was it
engine
to
lost
freak
control
a little kid out
and
this badly?
plunged
I don't
over the side
understand.
into
Like,
the swamps
okay,
below.
okay. For those of you who don't get this, who don't understand why this is so frightening, understand something about the Thomas the Tank Engine universe, okay? Okay. In the Thomas the Tank Engine universe, it has been long established that these trains are freaking alive, alright? They think, they act, they feel. They're living, sentient creatures, okay? That's why, you know, it's easy to relate to them. They encounter human problems, and, you know, I mean, they're still trains, they still have to have a driver to work, I mean, things like that. But they're alive. They think. So we just watched a train frickin' die. Or if it didn't die, it's stuck under the water, and it was never found, and it tries to get home, and it can't. I mean, that's sad, alright? I am sorry. This was scary for me as a kid to see that. It was heartbreaking. Even now, it still affects me, but not nearly as badly, in fairness. But, like, that's a kid's show. That is a kid's show. Alright? What the fuck? Now, granted, there are a few other episodes that could be considered, say, scarier, although I don't think any of them had the emotional impact as that did. Like, there was one I remember where Henry, he's one of the big green engines. Actually, I think the only big green steam engine. Anyway, you know, he has to go over this viaduct to take a delivery, and things get really creepy, and you see, like, shadows moving through buildings. It's actually a really, really creepy scene until you figure out what's actually going on. That one was, like, at first watch, it's really freaky, especially for someone like me who doesn't like ghosts. But, you know, once you figure out the explanation, it's not so bad, and even that isn't quite as bad as the very first time in the whole series they ever tried to do anything scary. That I remember well, because it's really weird that I remember it, because it was only like a 15-second sequence in the very beginning of the episode, and the rest of the episode wasn't even that scary. But this one sequence I remember scared me so much because it was just so...
Every year, on the date of the accident, it runs again as a warning to others, plunging into the gap, shrieking like a lost soul.